This is the 10th session, me and Sally. Wow, we made it through 25%, I think, of our course. The last time, we talked a little bit about, being able to kind of fix, I left a couple of comments on your PR, and then we talked a little bit about adding in validation on the modify. So let's just go ahead. Did you have a chance to kind of take a look at the pull request for Sally's library? Do you know?
I
Let's see.
couldn't pull it. Something I got to the problem, but I managed to put the update on it. I'm not sure.
Nice. Let's take a look. So what did I say? I said here, hey, single lines of code, whatever, whatever. So let's see here the unmodified version. There's still a well, let's see, maybe
I
GitHub.
can look at the
Mhm.
new branch. So I made 2 new branches. So I couldn't like pull out this one,
Oh,
this foundation
okay.
device. So
Okay, let's take a look at the new branch. No problem. So let's go into branches. Okay, so which one is it? Is it the
yeah,
oh, maybe
this
uh,
the
this one
last
here.
one, foundation book remove update. So this is the one that I cover all those
Okay.
basically comments. But the
Okay.
last one is the assignment. So
Okay, let's take a look. So this one here. So sorry, Sally. This one, you mean okay. I
so
see. Go ahead. Go ahead.
so the one that has at the end says like foundation book remove update. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like that one. So this is what I cover all those comments on the last
Okay.
session. And
Yeah,
then
uh, let's
okay,
create a pull request for it. Hang on. Let's take a look at this. This one has some conflicts, but let's just see what the files here are. So you fix this. This is perfect. You fix this. You need a tab here. So extra tab in here. This is all good.
missed that.
All right. So if you still have that branch handy, do you want to push just that tab in here for the
Let's see what is the branch. Let me
oh
think.
oh this is the one that's foundation book remove update.
Let's see where I am.
Mm.
There I got. Give me a second. Where I
All right. I'll leave just a small comment here. It says this needs a tab. This needs a tab. I'll just leave it here and then, feel free, after our session because, we can just okay, let me approve this in the in the let's see here. Finish your review. So may review. Okay, so you have a comment from me here. I'll wait on you on this one. And then you said the other branch is the one that is for found
assignment.
the assignment, which is the modify, right?
Yeah, valid
That,
version. No.
that's perfect. Let's take a look. So in here, so you have a fail and a pass, okay, and you're basically going and saying should throw null exception, null book exception on modify if book is null. So this is a null book. You're passing in an action, and then you're passing the null book in, and then this is the modify book. That's the implementation of that. Is there a so that's one. That's the fail, and then the pass is to do the validate book, and then just use the exact same. Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so let's go back to our branches here, and let's go create a PR for this branch. So this is foundation book validation modify. I'm gonna create a pull request, and then this is here foundations validate book on modify. Okay. And this is a PR that we actually can merge. Let's just hope it doesn't have any conflicts. It shouldn't because yeah, this will be good. So let's go back here and I'm gonna merge your code and boom, congratulations. Now you merged your first PR. Now we have, we're building, step by step every single piece of this system as we go like this. Okay. Are you ready to jump to the next step in our validations?
Yes.
All right, let's first go to the blackboard real quick, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about um, the basically our ability to understand validations, all the different types of validations that we can think of. So, okay, let me go back here real quick. Let me share my screen. Can you see the black screen, Sally?
Yes.
All right. So here's the deal, my friend. We talked about, different types of validations. When we do validate, so remember how there's always a tri nature of everything. Everything around us is always broken into threes and threes and threes and threes and threes. Wherever you go, us as human beings, we are a body, mind, and soul. You look at every structure in the world, you will notice that this structure is either something that's interacting with the outside world, something that is happening internally, and then something that is a dependency. The easiest thing in the world to explain this is basically to go and say let's say you walk in the outside world, so that's you interacting with the outside world. Your brain processes where you're going. So this is mapping, right? And then how you use a dependency to go out walking would be something like food. So you eat food, you start using your brain to say out, hey, where am I going? And then use your feet to walk in the outside world. Three different actions connected to each other. Everything around us is either every action we make, either, us living our lives like, people like to think they are very disconnected from each other, but in reality, if you look at our world, how it stands today, you are either, helping someone, or you are helping yourself, or someone is helping you, right? So you're either doing something for yourself to grow, or you are dependent on someone to grow, or you are a dependency for someone to grow. And all of us are changing and growing at the same time. All of us. This is why I always say, like, even our very nature and our very structure, and I know you're probably thinking, what's that has to do with software engineering? Everything. But I'll explain that in a second. Um, this is why we're always, human beings are always very connected, even when we try to pretend not to be. We're always connected. You can't really go through life without one of these particular actions happening. You're either self-healing or self-growing. You're either dependent on someone or someone is dependent on you. And so is software. Software is exactly the same idea. When I go and say you have controllers or exposers, and you have I will keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in. It's infinite levels. It's like going from an atom to a universe and back. So there, in the software world, there are exposers, things that show the world, like when you go and say console write line, that's an exposer, right? So there's exposers, and then there are, services. These are process services in here, and then inside this one, there are externals or dependency, right? But then if you zoom into this guy, we're going to take a zoom into this guy. You will see that the services themselves either do validations, or they do processing, or they do integration. Like the service itself, in and of itself, does the exact same thing. It goes and says, I'm either doing a validation for the incoming data, or I'm processing that incoming data, or I am integrating integrations with an external source. So these are three, and inside this one, there is another three. But inside this one, there is also another three. So let's zoom in a little bit further in here. And I apologize. I really don't mean to tell you this to complicate things. I just want to tell you how the engineering standard that I put together, and this is what this is really, is to simplify the world for people, to actually tell people, okay, here's what this is doing, and here's the three options. It's always come in threes and threes and threes like that. So sometimes the two mix together. It's like sometimes you have ideally threes and threes, but they mix together. Anyway, so let me just tell you this. Validation in and of themselves, there is structural validations, there is logical validation, and there is external validation or dependency validation.
Mm.
So far, you and I are just stuck in this level. Okay, we are stuck at this level,
Which level? Structural.
structural. We're just going and saying, structurally, is the data looking right? See how many fields, how many realms that we go in? Okay, I don't want to scare you, but structural in and of itself has realms in and of itself, but we really don't.
Mm.
I that would be an advanced topic to talk about. There is existent and non-existent, which is the null validation that you just checked. There is a simple structural validation when you say, a number cannot be zero. That's a default. And there is complex structural validation when you go and say a string cannot be null, empty, or white space.
Mm.
And we can go further and further, like I said to you, like we can go into these realms for days. But I'm just trying to kind of give you the high level. Anyway, so structural like what? Like when you have a model, let's say you have a class in here. Structural validation is when you go and say, this is a student model,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to make sure that this student model, if it has an ID that says ID is a GUID, or it has a name that is a string, right? Or maybe has a date of birth that is a date time or date time offset. We want to make sure that the values that are required do not have their default value. Like a GUID or an ID cannot be empty, cannot be an empty GUID.
Mm-hmm.
A name cannot be a null, empty, or white space. A date time cannot be, a default value like 1 year 1.
Mm-hmm.
So we passed in, I have to actually tell you the three types. Okay, let me go back here. So this sucker here is three types. And I'll tell you what these three types are. So there's existence validation, like whether the value actually exists or not, right? So this is existence validation, existence or required validation, right? And you're actually these sessions, that's a beautiful thing about these sessions. I haven't even talked to anyone about that. There's the things live in your head and you're saying, "Oh, I'm gonna get time to talk about it," and then you never get the time to talk about it unless you are in a session like this. So I really appreciate, your tenacity with these sessions, Sally. But anyway, there's existence, right? And then there is the other value, which is a default. This default is not really a null, like as a number that is a zero. The number is not really a null, right? And when you say date time offset, the date time offset still has a value, but it's a default value, right? And then there's the last one, which is the variety. And the variety is basically when you have null, empty, or white space, three different values that all confirm the same type. We are just touching this one here. This existence one is the one that you and I did yesterday and the day before, which is the null exception. You're going and saying, does the value exist at all?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So going back to Sally's project here, Sally library, let's go back here. Let me increase the font here real quick. Do you have any questions about any of that stuff that I just said?
No,
Anything at all?
it's clear thing.
Okay, I have found out that when I try to break down and standardize software for people, it makes it a little bit simpler for them to kind of know where they're at in terms of a map. So let me go down here and let's just talk about this part. Okay, so here's that part. Now let's talk about this idea here, which is that you went ahead. Let me get latest actually from the project real quick, and let's just talk about this piece here. You went ahead and said, "Hey, validate the book." Right? That the book is not null. We need a new line in here, Sally. Don't fix that. Okay. Now, now that we validated that this book is not null, we're gonna have to start looking into the little details that are in each and every attribute on that book. Okay, so let's go ahead and write something different. We're gonna create a new exception in here. And this new exception, we're gonna call it invalid book exception. So the book is not null anymore. We know that we passed the validation piece that says check if that book is null or not. Now we're in this stage where we need to create a new type of error that says this book is not null, but it has bad data in it. We're gonna inherit from a new exception library here that's called exception with the X. This is a library that I built that's gonna make our validation work very, very easy. Here, Sally. So give me a second here. Okay, I want you to, and even here's the thing. Most of the time where we get together and we talk together, if you can get at least as little as 10 to 20% from what I'm saying, you're a winner. I promise you. Because I repeat myself a lot. So whatever I missed the first time, I'm gonna come back to it again and again and again and again, and I'll never stop. They say, the preacher said I could write shorter sermons, but once I get started, I get too lazy to stop. Believe it or not, you are my fourth session today. So everything is going to be just fine in terms of sharing knowledge and kind of getting through with things. Okay, so let's go up in here, and I'm going to go up in here and say, okay, I'm going to take from my base library. Like I said, I'll explain this piece to you later, but this is invalid book. Please correct the errors. Something to that effect, and try again. Something to that effect. Okay, any questions so far about this piece?
No, it's good.
All right, what just happened? Okay, let me go back here. Okay, please correct the errors, okay? And try again here. All right, invalid book, please correct the errors and try again, or correct the errors and try again, because the other one, there's another type of exceptions that we're gonna put together that's gonna do that whole please do stuff for me. Okay, please correct the errors and try again. Now, we're gonna use that type of exception. We're gonna use that type of exception to kind of write a new test, Sally. So in the validations area here, I'm gonna write a new test in here that says fact, public void, should throw invalid book exception if book is invalid and is book is invalid. I'll just stop here. By the way, we're gonna grow a lot from there. If you look at my existing code, there's a lot of things that I'm skipping here intentionally, but I'm just trying to introduce these concepts to you one by one, just very slowly but surely. Okay. Okay. Um, let's see here. So I'm gonna go here and create a book with a bad with bad data in it. So I'm gonna go here and say invalid book, and this invalid book doesn't have any data in it. It doesn't have any data at all.
Mm.
And I'm gonna go and say, here's the exception that I expect to be thrown. Invalid book exception equal new invalid book exception. And in this invalid book exception, I'm gonna add an error value in here. This is invalid. If I know how to spell things right, invalid. Yeah, there you go. Invalid book exception dot add data. If I can pull in a second here, I probably need to do a build. One sec. Let me do a build here so it can pull out the dependencies and all that. Here we go. And then let's go back here and let's do add data, right? And this add data basically it's gonna go and say, I have a value key like this, and this value is the name of the book.id. So the ID is bad, right? The ID is bad, and the message that should come out from here should be something to the effect of ID is required.
Mhm.
I'm basically building an error, what I expect to come out as an error that will tell me, right, whether this exception has the right details in it or not.
Mhm.
That's my expected exception. Well, let's go down here and run the application. The exact same stuff that you did here. Action, add book, everything else in here is exactly the same, just like this. The only difference is that this invalid exception here, instead of null exception, it's gotta be invalid book exception, right? And I can actually go and say, Here is my invalid book. And I can actually go and say, I also want to validate. If I take this book exception here and I say this is invalid book exception, actual invalid book exception in here, like this, I can go up in here and say, make sure that the actual invalid book exception, right, dot compare data, data equals, right? I want to find out if this data that I'm adding in is the same as the invalid book exception that I created that has the data in it. I want to know that the data is the same, right? So both of these should be true. See what I'm saying here? I'm basically going and saying the exception that the method is actually going to throw, which is this guy, should have the exact same errors, the exact same data as the one that I expected. So I'm going to call this, for now, expected invalid book exception, something like this. Expected invalid book exception. So something like this, and then I can take that should be true down by 1, something to that effect. And then I'm going with the rest of this saying, this should never be called and all that kind of good stuff. Let's see if this test run and fails or passes. Let's go here. Here you go. Why is this guy complaining? He said, I expected you to throw an invalid book exception because the ID is bad, but you didn't. Right? So let's go and fix that. And let me fix the test name first. There's the test. Here we go. And let's take this here and let me do the commit. My commit here is basically fail, just like we write tests. There's that guy. And then let's go back into the actual logic in here. And I can go into validate book, again, back into validate book, but this time we're going to do something very different. I'm going to write something that I call a business rules engine. This is something very recent to my engineering standard. What it basically does is that it collects all the errors that may occur when we're validating a particular item. So I'm just going to go here and say validate. And this guy basically takes a bunch of rules. So parameters meaning a bunch of parameters. Do you remember when we were adding furniture and I said params? Do you remember that session?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something very similar to that. But instead of passing in furniture, I'm passing in a rule and a parameter name. And I call these validations. And it's okay if you don't get this right away because there's at least 3 or 4 patterns just into this one line of code that I just wrote. So in here, I'm basically going and saying, give me a bunch, infinite number of rules. So that's an array of rules. This is validations. And every rule will point to a particular parameter. So the ID is bad, or the first name is bad, or the last name is bad. Whatever the item is that I'm trying to validate, this guy is going to try to take care of that. So what are we going to do here? We need to collect all of these in an exception so we can throw that exception at the end of the day. So I'm going to go ahead and say invalid book exception. New invalid book exception. So that's my invalid book exception. And then I'm going to go iterate on each and every rule that I have in here. So dynamic rule and then string parameter. Sorry, rule and string parameter in what? In validations, because that's what we're iterating on. This guy here is what we call a tuple. And this tuple has a rule and a parameter. The rule is the actual function that will run the validation. The parameter is the name of the parameter in the function that I'm working with. It's a little bit of an advanced topic, but just bear with me and see how much you can pick out of it. So in here, what I'm saying is rule.condition. If the condition on this rule is true, then go ahead and add the validation rule, add data, right? Go ahead and add this validation rule. Sorry, absurd list, because I want to keep appending with a key that is the parameter name and a value that is the rule.message. Where is this condition and message coming from? I'll tell you in a second. The last thing here, after I get out of this for each, I'm going to go here and say invalid book exception, throw if contains error. So if this exception here has one or more of these errors, then go ahead and throw an exception. The exception is of type invalid book exception. Now I need to use this function in here. First of all, let's take this guy here and put it in its own function. So private static, private static. I'm just cleaning up the air for myself. Okay, so I'm gonna go here and say private static void validate book is not null. And I'm taking a book in here as an input parameter. And I'm gonna go here and do this. If the book is not null, so in here I'm gonna go and say validate book is not null, and I'm passing in the book in there. Okay, so that's the book. And then and and then let's do the other validate method. So I'm gonna go here and start adding some rules. We want to validate that the ID is not an empty ID. So I need to create a rule before I can use that rule. I need a rule in here. I need to pass a rule in here, and I need to pass a parameter. The parameter is easy. I can just go here and say name of book.id like this. Book.id. That's easy, but the rule is what I need to create. So let's create that rule. The rule is really just a simple function. So I'm going to go here and say private static dynamic is invalid, and I'm expecting to pass in a GUID, that's an ID. And I'm going to return in what? A condition, which is ID equal GUID.empty. That's me validating that the ID is empty. That's the condition in the rule. And the other thing that I need to validate, that I need to return that ID is required. So now I hope things might look a little bit clearer where the condition and the message are coming from. See, condition message, condition message. I'm passing in a list of rules and parameters, and I'm iterating over every single rule and a parameter to make sure that this particular condition is, if the condition is satisfied, meaning that the item is actually invalid, then we're going to go ahead and add this as an error. So let's try this in here. That basically means I can go here and say is invalid, and I'm going to go here and say book.id. So whatever is in that book.id, see, I just added one rule. I can add as many rules as I want because it's params, right? I can just go here and say validate anything else that's out there. I can go and do this. Check this out. Yeah, I can add as many rules in here, and it will be syntactically correct. Why is that? Why is it allowing me to add as many rules as I want? What do you think? Hmm. So in here, I added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Basically, I would assume like for book properties, there are many properties you could like check for validation, right?
That's true. The book has many properties, but what I'm passing in here is rules and parameters, right? And I can add in literally thousands of these. Why is this function not erroring out? Like for instance, look at this function here. If I go in here and say book again, it will error out. It'll say, no, you can't do that, right? What makes this validate function so different from any other function that it would allow me to add as many rules as I want like this? What do you think?
Like there was some word like dynamic. That.
The dynamism is a part of the rule itself. Let's take a look at this function again, see what's up. What do you think? What's in here exactly that's allowing me to pass as many rules as I want without any limitation? Just in this one line of code in here. What do you think?
Because of the params, yeah.
Params, exactly, the params, right? Remember when we were talking earlier in this course, we were talking about the furniture, and we said if I pass params, I can pass in as many as I want. That's
I
exactly why.
love your questions. Okay.
Be careful, pay very close attention because I'll talk, and then say, hey, what do you think about this?
That's your
Just to
question,
see.
just like in the what aspect you are asking like question.
Right. I mean, take your shot. There's no like I'm not gonna go and say, oh, she made a wrong answer. That's not gonna work.
No,
Anyway,
I meant to like understand the question first, like
yes, absolutely. Okay, so we have validated book is not null, and then I only have the one rule, the one only rule that says if the ID is invalid, right, go ahead and throw an exception about that ID. Does that satisfy our test? I don't know. Let's find out. there is some embedded kind of patterns that I'm trying to show you here, some of which is to show you that code is subject to change and nothing that I say here will ever be what's the word I'm looking for? Nothing here will ever be at a point where it's always staying the same. Nothing here will stay the same. Now, our test passed, but these two tests are failing. Can you tell me why these two tests are failing?
But that should have book.
So these two here, let's look at the errors that it's saying. It says invalid book, correct the errors and try again. How come it's throwing this exception here? What could possibly be the reason that this exception is being thrown at the happy path scenario? Why is this happening in here? What do you think? So the test that you and I wrote just right now, the the one that you and I wrote passed. It said, you cut the ID is bad and you blew up. Perfect, right? That's good. But some other tests broke, which are these two tests. How come?
Because book service test.
Hmm. There's something very common between these two that violates some of our new rules. Like this, these errors only started to happen as soon as we added this validate rule. Let's go into the business logic here. If I go back into my validate book rule and I disable this new code that I wrote, two tests, the two failing tests will pass and one passing test will fail. Look what happens. See? So why when I uncomment this code and I go and try to run the code again, I am surprised that two tests that used to pass, now they're failing. What could be the reason why they're failing?
Because now this is, checking for the, basically the input for them is an empty one, yeah?
Yeah, the input book is actually having an empty ID.
Mm-hmm.
So now this random book is not good anymore. We need to go and say, hey, actually, when you create an ID here, actually give it a proper ID. Good. That's a very good answer. That's exactly what it is. You're basically going here and saying this style that we used to create random book with and create an empty book is not working for us anymore because we now have checks that say that the ID has to have value in it. Does that fix our test here? Let's find out. Look at that. It passed. Because now see how these tests are evolving? I never, and this is one thing just for you, Sally, it's, a trap that I see a lot of software engineers fall in. They think that code is written in stone. Do you know what that means? They think that code will never change. It's not going to change. I literally write code that is wrong intentionally. So I can come back in the next session and I say, oh, sorry, this code is broken. This code is wrong. Let's go and solve it. So I'm only changing the code. Like a lot of the things that you and I are writing right now is going to change a lot later, but we'll come back to that piece. Okay. Do you have any questions for me about this particular piece here? So you got it, right? We added invalidation rules. We went in and we said, so let's do the same thing here then. We can go here and say, well, I need an actually random book, and this is not a random book. This is just an empty book. So I'm going to have to go here and say GUID.new GUID like this. And this will make all the tests pass. All the tests pass like this. Boom. Look at that. So now I can go back into my should throw should throw null, should throw invalid book exception. Choose this. Where is it? Yeah, this guy here. Should throw invalid book exception, and I can commit this as a passing test. This guy is pass, like this. Okay. Can you guess what your assignment is gonna be?
For the remove.
No, actually, your new assignment is gonna be around modify and add. We need to make sure that the rest of the attributes on the book are all validated. So we need to go here and say, hey, the next step here is to make sure.
Yeah, that's one I wanted to ask, like why only you did for book ID, so you should add more like for
I
all
know,
books, yeah.
but I'm a mentor. I only give you just the beginning of the way and let you walk the rest, right?
Mhm.
The rest is almost redundant at this point. Like you go and say title, you should go here and say text is required. Not title, text is required. You're gonna stay to the value, the overall value, because you have a lot of texts in here. Well, now you have another failing test. Check this out. Oh, let's try this again. Wait, this not okay. Hold on. So let's see here. This is validation. Should throw a validation exception. Text is required. Let's see what am I doing wrong? Data equal data. It's this guy. And let's see. See, I almost gave you an assignment of something that's broken. Bad. Bad, Hassan. Okay, so this guy's throwing an exception, and the exception here says, yeah, this is good, and let's keep going forward. Okay, here it is. And then this actual exception that came out has data of one result, which is the one result about the ID. What about the expected one that I have? This one has data, two results. How is it how is it that the test is considering this to be true? That's hilarious.
Maybe this.
Let me try something. If I flip this upside down, like if I take this here, I take this here, actual book exception, and I run this again. Let's see what happens. What is that error? Let's see. We can also do something to the effect of, let's see, let me try this. Actual exception dot data should be equivalent to expected exception dot data, like this. This would do the trick. Let's try here. There you go. And this guy here is going to say the error here would be expected the dictionary to have two items, but I only found one. Right? So this basically literally is telling you that you're supposed to add another validation in here, but it's not there. So I'm going to commit this as a failing test. Here's a failing test. Fail. And your assignment would be to make that test pass and then to finish the rest of them. Finish the rest of them. And I'm assuming in here this guy will fail as well. No, after you make that test pass, your add and modify will fail again. But I'll let you kind of navigate through it. Let me ask you this. Am I going at a fast pace? Or are you able to kind of keep up?
It's a kind of fast, but I think I will study tomorrow. Let's see. I kind
Okay.
of get the whole ideas, so I
Yeah.
just time to kind of think one by one. But can you please calm down? I didn't figure out what you just reversed the actual invalid with exception with expected. How come this one causes problem? I mean,
No,
like,
I didn't reverse it. I rewrote the whole thing. I said actual should be equivalent to this. Originally I was saying dot data equals. In here I was saying data equals.
mm,
Instead I just said the data.
mm,
The data here should be the same as the data here. The data in the actual exception that's coming out
mhm.
should be equivalent to the data that's coming out of the expected. That's all.
Okay, good. But shouldn't Uh,
Hmm.
no. I,
This actual exception is what's coming out of this function when you
mm,
actually run it.
right.
And this expected is the one that we built together, right?
Yeah.
Hmm. Go ahead.
I think for now, I think I just should go study more or think through one by one. So
If I
just
were you, mhm. If I were you, and I notice this with a lot of people that, I work with, if I were you, go back and watch our videos and watch them very slowly. Because some things, like normally, psychologists, they say we only kind of comprehend about 50 to 70% of what's actually being said. This is why I repeat myself a lot, because I know for sure there's at least 30% that's going to fall off. Watch our videos, watch them very, very closely, and listen to the stuff that I'm trying to say, even if at the beginning they don't seem to be relevant. Down the road, you'll be like, oh, that crazy guy was actually telling me about this story about this thing. Now it makes sense. It's
mm,
all connected. Like in my head, it's all connected. I just need to kind of find the right words and the right figures to shape so people are able to kind of understand, the ideas that I'm trying to communicate with them. This is why I use this blackboard a lot, because it communicates a lot more than what words can possibly do.
yeah,
Like
it's
this blackboard like this, it doesn't matter what native language people speak with, they can understand and translate these figures in their heads in their own native language. And it
right.
makes my life a lot easier, especially in the enterprise world where there's like a extremely diverse group of people that come from all different backgrounds around the world. They're working around the clock from all different time zones. If you start writing shapes like these, they're starting to see the inside of your brain. There's,
Exactly. That helps
yeah,
me to just even like kind of the picture stick to your mind. So
yep.
it's kind of very helpful.
Okay. I use both the picture and the text because some of us are kind of the memory is, I don't know, photogenic, something like that. And some of us like the text. I do both. So the code will talk, the text will talk, and I will talk, and we'll see which one sticks, right? Anyways,
Thank
okay. So yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I'm gonna go back here real quick. I
you.
just want to make sure that everything is committed. Okay, I just cleaned up this code rub, remove extra when comment and test. Let's be as specific as possible. I promise you. Like a lot of engineers, I see a lot of engineers, they just go and write something dumb like whip like this. This is dumb. Don't do that. Because that doesn't tell me really what's going on there. And it's gonna make it really, it's gonna bite where you don't expect, when you go and look for a particular commit that you worked on and you can't find it because the commit history is not telling you exactly what you've been working on. Something really important. And it's part of the documentation of this project and all that. All right, my friend, we're almost at the hour. Any questions at all?
I will come with question perhaps more tomorrow. But
I love questions. I love questions. You have questions and I have answers, and we'll see. Even if I don't know the answer to your question right away, that just means I get to upgrade my library of answers and go find the answers for you. It's always a pleasure working with you, Sally, and I hope that you're getting a benefit from these courses. I'm sorry things get a little complicated as you move further, but with persistence, with resiliency, with and I know how you're really powering through most of these as someone who never touched programming, except for MATLAB and some stuff like that. I know that you're gonna get there. Just be patient and be persistent. You already made it through 25%. So I'll tell you this much: programming or courses that the courses that I do for people and try to mentor them and all that, it's like a video game. At the beginning, it's really easy and simple. The first level. Have you ever played Mario when you were younger? Mario? Yeah. At the beginning, that first level is straightforward, right? Try the last level with the what's his name? I don't remember. To try to get the princess and fight that dragon thingy, it's very, very hard. But so is everything in life, right? If you want to be able to achieve something that only a handful of people, if you want to do something of value, you're gonna have to go all the way up until you work on something only a handful of people can understand. Although that my job is to streamline that information, it still requires passion and soul and persistence. I think you have them all. Always a pleasure to work with you, Sally, and I can't wait for the next session to talk a little bit more about more fun stuff. All right, cool. And thank you all for watching our session. The people that have been following our sessions, I really appreciate your patience and your resilience too for being able to sit through hour after hour after hour. So believe it or not, Sally, our sessions now are almost up to 10 hours worth of content. Maybe someday you'll help me write a book about all that stuff that I'm doing. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Sally, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Okay?
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye. Yeah, bye.